Their revenue income rather, is one that is continuously growing. We've reached that 1 trillion rand mark for quite some time, and we will clearly continue to do so, but the tax morality is becoming a big issue. South Africans perhaps not too keen on wanting to play forward with that sentiment because they don't feel like they're getting the service delivery they all should. We've seen it in the protests, of course, coming through, but we will continue to cross-examine that speech as it comes through. Finance Minister Tito Mboweni now on stage there and set to give his speech. Let's head right into that, and we will return right after that speech, of course, and give you more on the medium-term budget policy statement.
President of the Republic of South Africa, Deputy President in absentia, Cabinet colleagues, and Deputy Ministers, Governor of the South African Reserve Bank, leaders of all political parties, MECs for finance, representatives of organized business and labor, civil society and faith-based leaders, honorable members, Directors General of the National Treasury and other departments, the Acting Commissioner of SARS, fellow South Africans. It is my singular honor and privilege to table the 22nd medium-term budget policy statement for consideration of the House and of all South Africans. Today, I also table, firstly, the Division of Revenue Amendment Bill, secondly, the Adjustments Appropriation Bill, thirdly, the Special Appropriation Bill, fourthly, the Rates and Monetary Amounts and Amendment of Revenue Laws Bill, fifthly, the Taxation Laws Amendment Bill, sixth, the Tax Administration Laws Amendment Bill, and finally, the 2018 Adjusted Estimates of Expenditure. Madam Speaker, in A Tale of Two Cities, Charles Dickens says, and I quote, "It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom. It was also the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief. It was the epoch of incredulity. We were all going direct to heaven. We were all going the other way." I think that's nice to recapture. We were all going to heaven, and yet we were going the other way, which means to hell. So too is the present time, Mr. President. Madam Speaker, as a country, we stand at a crossroads. We can choose a path of hope or a path of despair. We can go directly to heaven, or as Dickens so politely puts it, we can go the other way. For ordinary South Africans, it has become a difficult time. Administered prices, such as electricity and fuel, have risen. Unemployment is unacceptably high. Poor services and corruption have hit the poor the hardest. Fortunately, under the leadership of our brand new president, and much like the central character in A Tale of Two Cities, we have, as a country, chosen the difficult path of redemption. The medium-term budget policy statement is a central part of our planning as a country. It is designed to outline how we spend scarce resources for the benefit of all South Africans. This policy statement provides us with an opportunity to take stock of the strides we have taken in the year. We do this in a data-driven way, providing credible evidence to judge our collective performance as a society. However, it is more than just a set of numbers or reams of data, charts and graphs or words. Our performance should be measured by whether people are gainfully employed, whether our children are learning in decent schools, and whether we have health care facilities that are up to standard. The statement is an opportunity to restore trust between government and the people. South Africans correctly expect more from their government. They are right to expect that their money is spent wisely and productively and goes to meeting their basic needs. The 2018 policy statement is built on a strong conviction that South Africa can be renewed indeed. It reinforces our commitment to the National Development Plan. It articulates the President's vision of Tumamina, Rumamehe. Together as a country, we can indeed rebuild and recast our future. We are at a crossroads. The statement highlights the difficult economic and fiscal choices confronting us over the medium term. We must choose a path that takes us to faster and more inclusive economic growth and strengthens the private and public sector investment. We must choose a path that stabilizes and reduces the national debt. We cannot continue to borrow at this rate. We must choose to reduce the structural deficit, for we cannot continue to have a wide difference between our revenue and expenditure. We must choose to reduce the structural deficit, especially the consistently high growth in the real public sector wage bill. I think that's why there was a ho-ho in my throat. New fiscal anchors may be required to ensure sustainability, in addition to the expenditure ceiling. We must choose public sector investment over consumption. Reconfiguring our state-owned companies requires us to take a hard look at how they operate. Let me repeat this. Reconfiguring our state-owned companies requires us to take a hard look at how they operate. Our current challenges with state-owned companies present us with an opportunity to demolish the walls that exist between the private and public sectors. To demolish the walls that exist between the private and public sectors. Along with other key economic institutions, we will urgently fix the South African Revenue Service. It is a matter of public record that the capacity of SARS has been weakened. It is in this context that the SARS leadership must and has to be strengthened. We cannot expect to continue functioning effectively if the tax collection authority is broken. The organization SARS has many talented and committed employees who want the organization to succeed and who are working tirelessly to rebuild trust. Madam Speaker, I present this policy statement against the backdrop of a technical recession in South Africa. The economic expectations at the time of the budget in February 2018 have not materialized. Since then, the risks to the global economic growth outlook have become more pronounced. Rising interest rates in the United States of America and a stronger dollar reflect a strong US economy. The Minister of International Relations is here, so I mustn't say what I wanted to say there. But I wanted to say something, despite the occasional trade barriers that are being introduced by some president. In the medium term, strong US growth will support export growth. But monetary policy normalization has created turmoil in financial markets. Countries with large twin deficit and high levels of external debt, such as Turkey and Argentina, have experienced sharp currency depreciation, rising credit spreads, and large capital outflows. In some cases, inappropriate policy responses have made the situation worse. Developing countries are now expected to grow by some 4.7% in 2018 and 2019. For 2018, South Africa's growth forecast has been revised down from 1.5 percentage points to 0.7%. Growth is expected to recover gradually over 2% in 2021 as confidence returns and investment gathers pace. That said, any forecast is based on a set of current assumptions. In the documentation table today, we outline different scenarios, including macroeconomic and fiscal risks. The National Development Plan outlines our long-term vision. A core element of this vision is a commitment to strong, sustained, and inclusive growth rates to sharply reduce unemployment, poverty, and inequality. During the first decade of our democracy, economic growth was closely linked with that of the rest of the world. Over the past decade, however, our growth has been significantly slower than our peers. With the right initiatives, we can once again recouple our growth performance with that of the global economy. Our growth agenda must raise potential output, increase potential output from where it is, by boosting productivity, increasing competition, and reducing the cost of doing business. As a start, the President has announced 5 measures to stimulate the economy. Number 1, implementation of growth-enhancing economic reforms. 2, reprioritization of public spending to support growth and job creation. 3, enhancing infrastructure investment and establishing an infrastructure fund. 4, addressing urgent pressing matters in education and health. 5, investing in municipal infrastructure improvement, which is very key. Allow me to take some time to expand on the various elements of the President's plan, provided my colleagues on the left will remember that this is my maiden speech. The first element of the President's plan is to implement growth-enhancing economic reforms. Rebuilding confidence will unlock private sector investment. Investors are in it for the long run. They want to know that our policies are clear and consistent. We must stop, Mr. President, talking in contradictory terms. The President has already taken the lead in rebuilding confidence by appointing a team of investment envoys. We look forward to the upcoming investment conference. Already in the mining sector, we have finalized the mining charter and we are withdrawing the Mineral and Petroleum Resources Development Amendment Bill. Where is the Minister of... Oh, thank you, Minister, thank you. Thank you for that. Visa requirements will be eased to boost tourism. We will make it easier for people with skills to work in South Africa. 10-year multiple entry visas will be extended to several countries. In communications, thank you for that. In communications, the proposed policy for the licensing of high-demand spectrum has been gazetted. Frequencies to enable high-speed internet will be auctioned early next year. Steps will be taken to reduce data costs and improve data quality. Recently concluded power purchase agreements will create an estimated 61,000 jobs and enable investment of 56 billion rand. Through the renewable energy IPPs, we have secured equity for local communities who will receive about 29.3 billion rand in net dividend income over the life of the projects. For recently signed projects, 53% is owned by South African shareholders, while black shareholders own 34% of the equity. Restructuring of the electricity sector is underway. This must include a long-term plan to restructure Eskom and deal with its debt obligations. A review of current electricity pricing policy will form a part of this process. We are building partnerships to find solutions to the development challenges faced by South Africa and the region. Here, I would like to emphasize the need for partnerships. The recent Job Summit brought together business, labor, community, government, and other leaders in our society to leverage our collective strength towards the urgent need to protect and create jobs. South Africa offers a strong investment value proposition. We have a highly diversified, open economy with an abundance of natural resources, an extensive and modern infrastructure network, and sophisticated and deep financial markets. The upcoming investor conference will showcase this strength to local and international investors. We are upgrading the economic planning and coordinating capacity of the state. Southern Africa towards inclusive economic development is a program with other government departments and international agencies to produce high-quality, evidence-based policy research. We've already published 24 research papers in 2018. The program will train young scholars and give government officials the opportunity to obtain their PhDs in economics and related fields. Our ultimate aim is to improve the interface between cutting-edge research and policy formulation, to avoid situations where sometimes policy is made on the hoof. The second element of the President's plan is about reprioritization and more effective spending. Spending is projected to be 5.9 trillion rand over the medium term. Spending will still grow faster than inflation. This is a lot of money. we can do more with it. We can do better with it. We're proposing a combination of reprioritization, changes to grant structures, and in-year allocations amounting to more than 50 billion rand. Of this amount, reprioritization of 15.9 billion goes towards infrastructure programs, supporting industrialization and the expanded public works program. An additional 16.5 billion rand of reprioritization will be allocated to various programs, including funding to restore capacity at the South African Revenue Service. Agriculture will be an important driver of our economic recovery. The Land Bank will continue to support emerging farmers. Our reprioritization efforts will support the bank to include transactions worth 16.2 billion rand over the next 3 to 5 years, which will help create jobs in agriculture. A significant portion of the funding will go towards export-oriented crops that are highly labor-intensive. And I said to the staff, for example, and they said avocados. Housing subsidies amounting to 1 billion rand will be centralized to help low to medium income households access affordable housing loans, which will result in more South Africans acquiring their own homes. We are determined to support greater economic development within townships and the countryside. Minister Zulu. Our spending on infrastructure aims to promote industrialization across the country. We are spending 668 million rand over the medium term to revitalize government-owned industrial parks in township areas. So far, government has upgraded infrastructure at Vulindlela and Komani, both in the Eastern Cape, Botshabelo in the Free State, Seshego in Limpopo, and Isithebe in KwaZulu-Natal. In economic literature, this is what is referred to as inward industrialization, just for reference. Since 2011, municipalities have completed over 270 projects to the value of 3.7 billion rand, funded through the Neighborhood Development Partnership Grant. This has attracted over 8.7 billion rand of private investment in townships. In Tembisa, for example, which is in Ekurhuleni, public investment to the value of 125 million rand in roads and transport infrastructure has enabled access to social and economic facilities. It is. The investment will attract, the investment will attract an estimated 3.5 billion rand of additional public and private investment in commercial, retail, and residential developments. In Msunduzi municipality, over 77 million rand in public investment in the Edenvale Urban Hub has already attracted private and public sector investment in excess of 1 billion rand. We will continue to roll this out in other parts of the country. Now, the Guiana water project is plagued by malfeasance. It is a cesspool of corruption. The challenges range from a complete disregard for supply chain rules to poor contract management, resulting in irregular expenditure. It is clear that a new delivery and financing model is required to provide water services to our communities. A key element of the new approach will be a stronger focus on project management and contract governance to ensure that projects such as the Guiana water project are fit for purpose and maximize value for money in the water sector. I have requested the Director General of the National Treasury to work with the Department of Water and Sanitation to ensure that appropriate action is taken against all guilty officials implicated in the Auditor General's report. The President has informed me that he will be visiting the Guiana area to see for himself what has happened and what needs to be done. We are dealing decisively and urgently with the water crisis in the Vaal River system. Our immediate focus is to mobilize short-term financing by reprioritizing funds and increasing capacity. I have asked the Commander-in-Chief of the South African National Defence Force, the President, and the Minister of Defence for the military to assist us immediately with engineering works and other expertise to resolve the crisis in the Vaal River system. I'm happy to report that both the President and the Minister have agreed. And I've already spoken to the officer commanding the reserve forces, who has taken the matter to the Central Command, the High Command. They've agreed. So you see soldiers there. Quickly. There's no point continuing to complain about an issue that we can resolve immediately. So that's what we're doing. The generals in charge have already started working on the solutions. Water is critical. Current water delivery models are clearly not working in many areas of our country, and we need to consider new ideas and models. Given the land transport intensity of our economy, it is vital that our road network supports growth and development. Over the medium term, funds are reprioritized to enable the strengthening and rehabilitation of national non-toll road networks, of which about 75% are beyond their design life. Now, but if we want our road transport infrastructure to work, we need to pay for our tolls. Government remains committed. So, honorable members, if we want the road network to work, we must therefore pay our tolls. Government remains committed. Government remains committed to the user pay principle because it is the most efficient and effective way to ensure that the direct benefits of services are paid for by those who use them directly. We need to restore a culture of payment in this country to ensure the sustainability of our services.
Order, honorable members.
And to give confidence to those institutions who invest in our bonds. The third element of the President's plan is to improve the government's approach to infrastructure investment and to establish an infrastructure fund. Over the next 3 years, public infrastructure expenditure is estimated to be 855.2 billion rand, of which state-owned companies alone account for 370.2 billion rand. General government accounts for the remaining 485 billion rand, mainly in the form of conditional grants. One of our problems is that too many projects are poorly prepared. Too often, government spends money on infrastructure when it could be better and more effectively done by the private sector. The Development Bank of Southern Africa, the Government Technical Advisory Center, and the Presidential Infrastructure Coordinating Commission will receive 625 million rand to strengthen project preparation. Development, Minister Patel is supposed to clap a bit harder. Development finance institutions, multilateral development banks and private banks have committed technical resources to help finance, plan, and implement projects. We will develop innovative finance solutions that combine capital from private and public sectors. Government will establish an execution unit made up of engineers, quantity surveyors, architects, and other professionals to ensure that challenges that we face in various schemes are resolved speedily. The execution unit will also advise government on new delivery and financing models to provide basic services to communities. More often than not, it's a very simple thing, actually. But sometimes we take longer to deal with simple things. Government will also develop a framework to help investors assess potential long-term returns on public infrastructure projects. We want to enable investment in public infrastructure by commercial banks, development finance institutions, and pension funds. This will require both innovative financing mechanisms and accompanying regulatory reforms. We have successfully partnered, for example, with the private sector in the past. The N3 highway between Johannesburg and Durban and the N1, N4 Platinum Highway were built and are operated and maintained by the private sector. For these projects to operate efficiently, we have service level agreements which make them accountable to the government. These kinds of partnerships should be accelerated in the future. The fourth element of the President's plan is to address urgent and pressing matters in education and health. The largest allocations in the medium term are for education, health, social development, and community development. Together, these four areas will receive more than 60% of the non-interest expenditure. Nobody should learn in a school that is unsafe. Madam Minister of Basic Education. Our children must have access to adequate sanitation. We have committed to eradicating pit latrines at all schools. The President has directed that there is a plan to ensure that all schools have safe and appropriate sanitation. We will ensure that female learners in schools have access to sanitary pads. Several provinces have already taken the lead in rolling out the provision of these free sanitary pads in schools. Funds will be added to the provincial equitable share to enable provinces to progressively further this initiative. Access to healthcare services is enshrined in our Constitution and in our Bill of Rights. We will continue to work very closely with the Department of National Department of Health and other role players to ensure that the gradual phase implementation of the National Health Insurance System is adequately financed. We're immediately reprioritizing 350 million rand to recruit in excess of 2,000 health professionals into public health facilities. We are further reprioritizing 150 million rand to purchase beds and linen for hospitals where the need is most dire. These two interventions build on the Presidential Health Summit convened last weekend, which brought new focus, to improving the quality of our health system. The final element of the President's plan to stimulate the economy focuses on investing in municipal social infrastructure. All South Africans share the pain of poorly performing municipalities. Potholes here and there, broken street lights, roads that flood when it rains, and challenges with electricity. We are acutely aware that some municipalities are facing serious capacity constraints in executing their plans and programs. The Auditor General has consistently shared audit messages that emphasize the importance of accountability in the management of municipal affairs. This year, 113 municipalities adopted unfunded budgets, up from 83 in the previous year. Municipalities owe more than 23 billion rand to service providers, mainly to Eskom and water service agencies. In many cases, like in Mudimule Mukhopo municipality, the financial challenges faced by municipalities are a reflection of weakness in government, or even fraud and outright corruption. The funds lost by municipalities in the collapse of VBS Mutual Bank offer a dramatic illustration of how greed and corruption impacts negatively on the achievement of our development objectives. On VBS, although you debated this matter extensively yesterday, it is important to raise a few issues. Firstly, that the poor depositors in VBS have not lost any money. The poor depositors at VBS have not lost any money. The poor depositors have been paid. Have been paid through the arrangement made by the governor, or rather by the regulator and another bank. Secondly, the biggest losers, of course, have been the shareholders and the municipalities that deposited into VBS. Thirdly, it is important that as we deal with the VBS matter, we do not throw the baby out with the bathwater. The model of VBS before the great heist was correct, i.e., reach out to the poorer communities, provide banking and financial services to them as part of the struggle to transform the banking and financial services sector. To that extent, we will work together with the regulator to ensure that that model doesn't disappear from the South African sector. However, the perpetrators of the great bank heist must be locked up after a fair trial. As I said, this matter was ventilated in the House yesterday, and therefore there's no need to repeat it. So, yes, those who benefited illegally. Now, just as you recover your breath, the advocate Mutau, who did the investigation, says that there was this heist in Krugersdorp where criminals, yes, they did a lot of hard work. They dug a tunnel to the bank, hard work. and they eventually reached the bank. And they got out with 400,000 rand and disappeared, were never arrested. Huge amount of effort for nothing. Well, so you might think. Actually, the criminals were not after the 400,000 rand. They knew that in that bank was kept safety boxes, and that illegal rich people had kept their valuables in those safety boxes. Diamonds, jewelry, that's what they wanted. And they knew that the thugs, the depositors would not do anything about it because they had not declared those goods. So, Madam Speaker, we have many such cases of theft and poor projects in our country. And these corrupt practices have indeed to be removed from our system. For those of you who have some knowledge of the Bible, you will recall the words of Isaiah in chapter 58, verse 12, and I quote, "Your people will rebuild the ancient ruins and will raise up the age-old foundations. You will be called a repairer of broken walls, restorer of streets with dwellings," unquote. Amen. 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 We must repair our towns and our streets and fix the water pipes under our roads. The National Treasury will work closely with the Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs to deal with financial misconduct in all spheres of government. We are developing measures to improve transparency and governance processes. Key is the employment of qualified, competent, and incorruptible officials. We need to restore a culture of compliance with the Public Finance Management Act and the Municipal Finance Management Act in all organs of the state. Civil society can help too. In some cases, such as in Emalahleni, citizen associations have successfully challenged local government to implement the measures prescribed by law to address financial problems. The President's plan is achievable. It's achievable. But any growth plan must be built on sound macroeconomic preconditions, a sustainable fiscal position, and low and stable inflation. I am confident that Governor Kganyago and his team will continue to work tirelessly to keep inflation down. And please, honorable members, let us not distract him with some regular attacks on the mandate and independence of the South African Reserve Bank. Today, I take advantage of my maiden speech to reiterate what is contained in Section 224 of the Constitution of the Republic. It says, the South African Reserve Bank, in pursuit of its primary objective, must perform its functions independently and without fear, favor, or prejudice. But there must be regular consultation between the bank and the cabinet member responsible for national financial matters. In this instance, those two So in this situation, my job is to strengthen the fiscus, and his job is to keep inflation low and stable. Government remains committed to its goal of stabilizing and bringing down the debt to GDP ratio. In recent months, deteriorating economic performance, revenue shortfalls, and a weaker rand have all contributed to higher debt projections. The consolidated budget deficit is estimated at 4% in 2018-2019, compared with the 2018 budget projection of 3.6% of GDP. After rising to 4.2%, the deficit stabilized at 4% in the outer years. Gross debt is on pace to stabilize at 59.6% in 2023-2024. Other risks identified in the February budget have materialized, including a public service wage agreement significantly above inflation, and the continued decline in the financial condition of some state-owned enterprises, leading to requests for budget support. In recent budgets, we took important steps by reducing the expenditure ceiling and increasing taxes. Given the weaknesses of the economy, the government is aiming to manage these pressures while avoiding additional fiscal measures that could limit growth. The 2018 Public Service Wage Agreement exceeds budgeted baselines by about 30.2 billion rand. We have not allocated additional money for this. Can I just repeat this? The 2018 Public Service Wage Agreement exceeds budgeted baselines by about 30.2 billion rand over the medium term. We have not allocated additional money for this. National and provincial departments will be expected to absorb these costs within their compensation baselines. The Department of Public Service and Administration will work with national and provincial departments to help them manage the implementation of this agreement while protecting our key development priorities. The wage bill remains the biggest cost pressure on the budget. Over time, wages have crowded out other goods and services and capital investment, particularly in health, education, and defense. And we have to be more responsive to the requests from the generals about the defense budget. I'm a retired honorary colonel, so I know what's happening there. In some cases, this has contributed to a buildup of unpaid invoices in provincial governments. Around 85% of the increase in the wage bill is due to higher wages rather than headcount increases. The national wage ceilings remain unchanged despite the new wage agreement. Revenue collections up to the end of September 2018 have grown by 10.7% compared to the same period last year. Latest estimates, however, suggest that the full year collections will be 27.4 billion rand less than expected, of which 20 billion rand reflects increased VAT refunds, and 7.4 billion reflects lower corporate tax and personal income tax. Although some of the VAT refunds reflect once-off payments, we expect revenue shortfalls of 24.7 billion in 2019-2020 financial year and 33 billion in 2020-21 financial year relative to the 2018 budget. Madam Speaker, Concerns have been expressed about the slow pace of VAT refunds. We recognize this, that it has hurt the cash flow of a number of companies, including small and medium enterprises. The acting SARS commissioner is committed to processing the outstanding VAT refunds as quickly as possible. We estimate total additional refunds of 20 billion rand, made up of 11 billion rand to clear the backlog and an upward revision of 9 billion rand for the current fiscal year. We are of the view that this will provide a much needed stimulus, actually, to the real economy as people will have more money in their hands. So it's not negative, it's actually positive. As you know, an independent panel of experts investigated options to mitigate the impact of the VAT increase on lower income households. My thanks to the panel for their excellent work. I would also like to thank the 30,000 individuals and NGOs who provided commentary on the panel's recommendation. Madam Speaker, I received 3,299 tweets in total recently when I requested people on Twitter to give me some advice. I'm awaiting the one from the President. He promised me one on Monday. One of them is Tintsingwenya in Johannesburg, who said, sanitary pads should be tax-free. After considerable debate and consultation, as of the 1st of April 2019, government will zero rate the following items. Number one, sanitary pads. Floyd, I thought you'd clap. Okay. I want to see you clapping. Thank you. 2, bread flour. 3, cake flour. Now, I know you are clapping, that's very good, but here is the thing. So the revenue loss associated with zero rating these items is estimated at 1.2 billion rand. So, yeah. Shakarata but. However, zero rating these products targets low-income households and restores the dignity of our people. So that we're clear about this thing. So the zero rating of the pads, but also free provision to poorer schools. Right? On carbon tax, we have listened carefully to the concerns of business and labor during the parliamentary hearings. The carbon budgeting system and the carbon tax will be aligned. This is done by imposing a higher tax rate as a penalty for emissions exceeding the carbon budget. The original date of implementation was 1 January 2019, but this will be postponed to 1 June 2019. We can spend our money better, Madam Speaker. Too much money goes missing. We must restore good governance and fight corruption in all of its forms. Money that leaks out of the system is no longer available to support our efforts to reduce poverty and lighten the burden on the poor. Madam Speaker, among the many tweets we received from the South African public was a plea to strengthen internal auditing capacity at our municipalities. It is necessary for us as a country to face up to the events of the recent past and learn from them. We are taking the following steps to strengthen financial management. First, Treasury will work with the Office of the Auditor General to reduce fruitless and wasteful, irregular, and unauthorized expenditure. Law enforcement agencies will be requested to act swiftly without fear or favor against those implicated in wrongdoing. Two, at local government level, we are deploying skilled professionals to boost revenue collection and attain our developmental objectives. Many of these professionals are retirees who have responded to the call by the President, Tuma Mina. Three, there will be financial recovery plans for non-performing departments. This, in short, means if you don't spend, we'll take the money. Madam Speaker, our state-owned companies can spend our money better as well. Many of these state-owned companies need to be reconfigured. Let me just repeat that. Many of these state-owned companies need to be reconfigured. Emphasis is reconfigured. In the past year, almost all of the regional and domestic routes operated by South African Airways were profitable. SAA will reduce, ultimately, maybe stop operating some of the loss-making international routes. SAA procurement has unlocked annual cost savings of about 400 million rand. And this is a picture they're going to bring out of me sweating. You'll see. The minister sweats over the budget. Oh, you cheated already. It's fine, it's okay. Despite these efforts, cheers. Despite these efforts, SAA is still loss-making, and even more radical measures are then needed in this regard. In the reconfiguration of state-owned enterprises, there must be no holy cows. To support a sustainable reconfiguration model of our airline portfolio, in 2018-2019, government will provide additional funding to SAA and South African Express Airways. Minister Gordon and I are working closely to limit the fiscal cost of these measures. By the end of the year, the boards of these two companies will present plans to strengthen and align their operations. Government has been working with the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. Government has been working with the Johannesburg Stock Exchange to strengthen debt listing requirements for all issuers, including state-owned companies. These proposals aim to bring about increased transparency and improved governance for state-owned companies and complement other government measures. Madam Speaker, as I conclude, allow me to thank the President for his guidance and leadership. My appreciation also goes to the Deputy President. I'd like to thank the Minister of Defense. For the first time, the Minister of Defense is thanked in a statement for the assistance that we are receiving from the Defense Force. I'd like to thank my cabinet colleagues who have been more than patient with me as I've been working my way through this process, in particular the Ministers' Committee on the Budget. Thank you very much for your help. I wish to thank the provincial premiers, MECs, municipal mayors who share our fiscal and financial responsibility. I'd like to thank Deputy Minister Ngungubele It's a very interesting deputy minister to work with. It's very interesting. I'd like to thank the acting commissioner of the South African Revenue Services, thanking the 10th governor of the South African Reserve Bank and the staff at the Reserve Bank, the Director General of the National Treasury, also a very interesting fellow. I know that members of the House will join me in expressing our appreciation to the whole staff of the National Treasury, the Revenue Services, and the finance community. I'm also grateful to the Finance and Appropriation Committees who have responsibility for steering consideration of the Division of Revenue Amendment Bill, the Adjustments Appropriation Bill, the Finance Bill, and the Taxation Bills. So, Madam Speaker, a budget statement, as I said, is not the budget. The budget is in February. This is a medium-term statement. And we are presenting this statement then against a bedrock of South Africa finding itself at the crossroads with lower growth and therefore lower revenue collections. That's why we need tough choices. Secondly, our economic outlook has been revised downwards. Thirdly, against this background, together we have much to do. We must repair damaged government institutions as their failure impacts on poorer households the most. There have been governance challenges at key state institutions. This we have to deal with. State institutions are being repaired and renewed. That's a background. State-owned enterprises are being reconfigured, as we have said. The President has initiated a plan that will support our economic recovery plan. And finally, we wish all of you success as we debate this medium-term budget statement. Ikesengo Shune.
Honorable members, we congratulate the brand new minister for his maiden speech, and that concludes the business of the day, and the House is adjourned.
We are out of the National Assembly, where we're taking political reactions around the medium-term budget policy statement. And our first guest is Mr. Steve Swart from the ACDP. Your impressions on this maiden speech by the Finance Minister?
Well, we know the Minister of Finance had very little fiscal space to move. And so what we believe he announced today will hopefully satisfy investors and credit ratings agencies. But we from our side are concerned about the spiraling debt costs and the debt service costs. This will place constraints on our public finances, but it did announce steps to address and stabilize our public sector companies such as Eskom, and we are slightly concerned about the bailouts to SAA and SA Express. But clearly there are steps that he has announced which are positive, but when balanced against what he has inherited from the Zuma administration, he has faced with a very, very difficult situation in balancing the books. We will see clearly in February's budget speech the details as to how he exactly will balance the books, but thankfully all indications are that he's not going to increase tax.
Rating agencies are looking at this as well as investors. Do you think he struck the right chords with regards to this medium-term budget policy statement?
We are hopeful that he has, because given the low economic growth that we've faced with, he has managed to address the spiraling public sector wage bill. He has managed to say we are going to address the state-owned companies, Eskom in particular, that presents the largest threat to our public finances with the guarantees. And we see turnaround strategies there. We see a new board on Eskom. We see what Parliament has done with the Eskom inquiry, and of course the inquiries into corruption and state capture. That needs to be addressed. We have to reduce government expenditure, and if that is done, we are convinced that ratings agencies and investors will invest in South Africa and will be satisfied with this plan. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Steve Swart from the ACDP giving us his thoughts around this mini budget by Finance Minister Tito Mboweni. My colleague Abra Babia is standing by for more political reaction.
Bulelani, thank you so much. With me, I have David Maney of the DA, who's going to give up some of his observations following the budget today, and the mini budget at least. David, off camera, you spoke about some things that concerned you. You mentioned SAA. Can you just elaborate on what it is that bothers you?
Well, I think what we've seen here is a full-scale budget blowout, with the fiscal deficit increasing in respect of about a few billion rand, and with national debt eventually settling in the outer year at about 3.8 billion rand. And what that means is that debt service costs in 2021 will be about 247 billion rand, which is roughly equal to what we will be spending on basic education this year in South Africa. Our public finances are now unsustainable, and that is why we believe we should implement a full-scale, comprehensive spending review in order to eliminate wasteful expenditure in South Africa.
We're going to have to keep it short. Thank you so much for your time, David. I'm now crossing over to my colleague Arabile, who will be bringing you more updates.
Thank you so much. Well, I am joined now by Dennis Dykes, Chief Economist at Nedbank. Let's immediately get into your thoughts then, Dennis. Growth projection completely halved, if not more so. Everything from debt situation, of course, even worsening. Picture clearly not a good one.
Yeah, look, the fiscal arithmetic's not great. You've got the deficit staying at 4% or above in certain cases. You've got the debt trajectory going to just under 60% of GDP at the peak. So it's, the numbers don't look great, but if you look underneath the numbers, government's managed to keep its expenditure ceiling under control. They have left it unchanged. They managed to reprioritize expenditure. So the big story, I guess, is that we've had revenue shortfalls because of weaker growth, but also because of these VAT refunds which have been held back and now have to be given back to those who it's owed to.
Yeah, the minister did say as well that I will ensure that the fiscal consolidation path stems forward and continues on this path. Does that stave away the ratings agencies?
Yeah, look, I mean, it's really rhetoric at the moment, because if you look at the arithmetic, it doesn't look like it. But fundamentally, and I think the minister understands this 100%, you actually have to have economic growth. So fundamentally, we need to get investor-friendly programs in place, policies in place that encourage people to come and create jobs and put fixed investment, new factories. Unless we have that happening and we start to see growth rates in excess of 3%, the fiscal position is going to deteriorate and we will be downgraded. So hopefully there'll be a stay of execution, but I don't think Moody's in particular is going to be particularly happy with the numbers as they look.
Yeah. Dennis Dykes, appreciate your time. We'll let you head off as well. Getting a little bit hot out here as well. Back to Bulelani Philip.
Well, thanks so much, Arabile. We continue to digest this MTBPS statement by the Finance Minister. And now joining me is the leader of the Freedom Front Plus, Dr. Pieter Groenewald. Obviously, the maiden speech by the Finance Minister, do you think he's struck the right chord?
Well, he started by quoting also from the Bible, and that actually says that they're going to rebuild the ruins. So it is an admittance that the SA government actually ruined the country. The fact of the matter is that he didn't say really anything that positive that is going to rebuild the economy, because we have to build the economy to create jobs in South Africa. He referred to the service cost of our debt, That is 162 billion annually, going to rise to 221 billion over the midterm, which means that the taxpayers will have to pay more, and we can expect increases in our taxes coming next year. What was positive was the fact that when it comes to the Civil Service Corps, he said that there's already an overspend of 30.2 billion, which is not going to refund. So the state departments will have to see how they're going to deal with the servants in those specific departments. And therefore we say those are positive things. He has identified the problems, but he didn't really say how he's going to solve it. Let's take, for instance, the state-owned enterprises. He admits that they will have to be reconfigured, but the problem is that he is still giving 5 billion more for SAA, SA Express, and even the post office. In total, they get another 9.1 billion. If you look at the figures as far as the shortfall as far as taxes collection is concerned, it fell to 27 billion, which is positive because when we had the budget in the beginning of the year, we spoke about the 40 billion shortfall. So there are positive things, there are negative things, but in the end, he has identified the problems, but the proof lies in the eating of the pudding.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Peter Groenewald, the leader of the Freedom Front Plus. I'm going to cross now back to my colleague Arabile on the other side of the precinct.
Yeah, thank you so much, Bulelani. Well, Matthew Park joining me now from COSATU. Let's immediately get your thoughts, Matthew Parks. What is your thoughts of the budget, the midterm budget that has just been delivered?
Sure, I think we recognize the difficulty that the minister is in. The government is in a crisis, the economy is in a recession, but I think for us it's a missed opportunity. We're a bit underwhelmed. We didn't get a sense of clear specifics on how government is going to turn the economy around, take us from this recession to positive economic growth, how to create jobs. We have 1 out of 3 workers unemployed. We had hoped to hear much more from him. But how will government deliver on the job summit agreement it signed recently? How will it guarantee the stimulus package? What's the details in it? There was silence. We didn't see much meat around how will we deal with wasteful expenditure, which the AG says is about 100 billion rand. We didn't get a sense of how we're going to recover the stolen money, which is in the hundreds of billions. So we're quite disappointed in that regard. Also for us, the state-owned enterprises, Eskom, SAA, SABC, we didn't get a sense of a plan. How are we going to save those SOEs? We got an acknowledgement of the crisis, but not what's the plan to take us forward.
Yeah. We did, however, get a reprioritization of funds in order to put in a necessary investment into nearly 2,000 odd workers in the health sector as well. So that must be some set of good news.
No, sure, that is welcome. That is part of the job summit agreement, so we're glad they're moving towards it. But look, there's about 148,000 public service vacancies. We have not seen teachers being employed for some years. The police officer headcount is reducing. We need to fill those critical service level vacancies, and we need to see the fat being reduced on the top. So we agree with the minister that the cabinet is too large. It should be cut by 2/3. But we need to see more reduction in the wasteful expenditure at a cabinet level, reducing the perks, putting a ceiling on the amount of money that the CEOs of SOEs get paid, so we can reprioritize that towards paying for teachers, for nurses, for doctors, for police officers.
Yeah, Matthew Parks, appreciate your time there. Of course, we continue to get sentiment, some crossings through as well. I'll cross over to my colleague Abra now.
Arabile, thank you so much. With me right now, I have Professor Nhlanhla Kubisa, Chief Whip of the NFPA in Parliament. Sir, you spoke about what caught your ear was the mentioning of education, health, those sectors. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. The new minister was walking a very tight rope, and I think he came well when it came to education, health, and social development, because these are key areas where we have to resuscitate the economy. And above all, on the issue of ensuring that each and every school has appropriate sanitation, giving sanitary towels to our girls, it's bringing about dignity to our education as well. I think those issues are welcome, and also bringing some experts in our health sector and resuscitating our buildings that are so dilapidated at the moment. These are issues that should be welcome. On the issue of corruption, fraud, irregular expenditure, and also wasteful expenditure, I think he came out very well. He was very minimal when it comes to the issue of job creation, but he also touched on the issue of township and also rural economy development, ensuring that some money is given to the municipal infrastructure as well. So those are issues that are very important. But what is the key is to ensure that we give some jobs to our young people, because the key challenges of this country are unemployment, poverty and inequality. I think next time we'll touch on that, because this was merely a statement.
Prof, thank you so much for your time. I'm now going to hand over to my colleague Bulelani. I think he's got the TG of the ANC with him right now. Bulelani, it's all yours.
Well, thanks so much, Abra. Yes, we've got the ANC Treasurer General, Mr. Paul Mashatile. We'll go straight into it. Do you think this is a pro-poor budget?
Well, firstly, let me say the ANC welcomes the broad thrust of the budget. Obviously, it's under difficult economic conditions, but yes, pro-poor. We welcome the zero rating of basic things that affect poor people, including sanitary pads, particularly more support for children in poor schools. But what is good with this budget is that it is focusing a lot on investments. As the minister was saying, you know, tomorrow there is an investment conference starting in Johannesburg. So a lot of funding priorities are going into economic activity, strengthening the stimulus package that the president has announced. The minister went to town to explain how funding is going to be made available, particularly on those 5 priorities that the president had announced to stimulate the economy. So it is bringing back confidence in the economy, and that we will, in the long run, see recovery of our economy, creating necessary employment and actually addressing basic services to poor communities.
All right, Mr. Paul Mashatile, thank you so much for your time, and continuing to give you a cross-section of political analysis and reaction to this mini-budget speech. We now cross to the other side. Arabila, I think you're standing by.
Indeed, I am, Bulelani. Thank you so much for that. As you said, continuing to give you that rollout and extensive coverage of the medium-term budget policy statement delivered by the Finance Minister, Tito Mboweni. I'm joined now by Fedusa's Dennis George now as we unpack some thoughts of the union. Mr. George, thank you so much again for your time. We spoke a little bit earlier on. Did it meet your expectations?
Yeah, I think the government laid down the rules that they reprioritize spending to support inclusive economic growth and employment creation. And then government have also made a point to prioritize education, health, community and social development, which is very critical. I think the provision of the sanitized pads for young girls in the schools, I think that is critical. But also the fact that government have made provision to appoint 2,000 health professionals, because we need people in professional services to care for our people and so on. There's a number of other measures where government want to, specifically with the infrastructure, to bring in the army, to provide support, because we can see there's a problem, but if we're not going to do something about the problem, it's not going to help us going forward. But we think it was a right approach of the budget, and we think, going forward, it's going to help us to ignite growth and job creation.
Certainly forming part of the cohesive nature of this budget and what government is aiming to achieve. Dennis George, appreciate your time there. I'll cross back to my colleague Bulelani.
Well, thanks so much again, Arabile. We're now joined by the Chief Whip of the Economic Freedom Fighters, Mr. Floyd Shibambu. Thank you so much for joining us. Your thoughts on this mini budget by the Finance Minister?
Look, the summary of the medium-term budget policy statement is that it's underwhelming. What the new minister did was to provide a lot of thorough diagnosis of the South African economic challenges, but he never offered concrete solutions. He identified that our debt to GDP ratio is now going towards uncontrollable levels, but he has never said as to how do we get out of huge debt levels. He's never spoken about thorough, proper tax reforms, the tax avoidance issues that I've been speaking about in terms of what should happen. He never offered immediate immediate or medium or long-term solutions in terms of how do we get out of the low economic growth, because the majority of the things that he spoke about increased expenditure in infrastructure are things that have been happening, have been announced before. So overall, the whole intervention was underwhelming. I don't think that people must have any renewed hope that there's going to be anything different done. And he has actually fired very worrying shots in terms of the size of the public service and the wage bill. So workers must be very worried, because it looks like he ultimately is going to cut down the public service, meaning that a lot of public servants are going to lose their jobs, because if there's one thing that will never happen is to reduce people's salaries. That is not a viable option. So the only thing which he is left with is to cut down the public service, and workers should never agree to the cutting down of the public service, because there are lots of other options that can be explored. So instead of government relying on consultants and advisory services which are external, it must then retrain the people who are in the public service to deliver services to the state directly, because currently they're just conduits of contractors from outside, and they're not adding much value that is needed for a state to maximally function and give benefits to our people. But in the manner in which it was presented, it is underwhelming, really. There is nothing really that came out that we can say that there's now renewed hope. South Africa is in a technical recession, and it looks like with the manner in which they are approaching these issues, they were going to go into full recession at the end of this economic year.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Floyd Chibambu, the Chief Whip of the Economic Freedom Fighters. We're now going to cross back to Abra Babia on the other side of the precinct.
With me right now, I have Mabayomzi Kwankwa of the UDM here in Parliament. You expressed some issue with the bailout to SAA, if I'm correct.
Well, let me start by saying that we're where we are today because of government's cavalier attitude to fiscal rectitude. I mean, we've been warning them about the mismanagement of the finances, and here we are today. We have a country that is broke, to put it mildly. The bottom line with SAA is that what happens with these SOEs, it seems like government continues to throw money at the problem rather than addressing the problem. I mean, what happened to the people who squandered the bailouts that were given to those institutions before? You have an SAA that did not submit financials for the past 3 financial years. They even missed the deadline, even the September deadline. But now what are we doing? We're just giving them money. And if they squander this money, there will be no accountability. No one will go to jail for it. There's just a culture of impunity in the African National Congress. The second issue, I think, which is important, is that yes, indeed, is correct by saying you are going to lose R1 billion, say by zero rating 1 or 2 or 3 items. But the bottom line is that value-added tax contributes about 300 billion rands to the fiscus, as opposed to the 217 billion rands that corporate income tax contributes to the fiscus. So it's about time that the ANC government touches the corporate income tax as well. But the other issue is that when it comes to zero rating items, we started this debate way back in 2015 when most parties were fast asleep, and we said they needed to do a proper study about it and make sure that they phase it in properly. What is the point now of having items that are only going to be zero rated in April next year when you're already generating revenue this year? So it means that the ANC is actually playing tricks with us. It's not committed to this thing, and you're only zero rating 3 items. But we must say that we must welcome the fact that they decided to zero rate sanitary towels as a good step.
At least there's one thing you're happy about.
Correct.
Thank you so much. I'm now crossing back over to my colleague Arabile.
Thank you so much there, Abra. Well, I'm joined by Enoch Godongwana, Economic Transformation Policy Head at the ANC. Baba, thank you so much for your time. Some would say, and we've just heard a moment ago, that we are perhaps throwing money at the problem. Would you agree with that sentiment, or do you think that this MTBP has perhaps shared a distinctive sign of where South Africa is headed?
Look, it's a well-crafted budget under difficult circumstances. Slow growth, as you can see, the growth has been revised downwards, and that's why it's got implications for revenue. But despite that, there's been massive focus on investment, particularly on infrastructure. For the first time, when you see the investment by general government exceeding investment by the state-owned enterprise, so there's a balanced, focused budget, rather than consumption, but on investment.
Yeah. Do you believe that this is a sure sign then for the ratings agencies, for investment firms as well, to come back into South Africa?
The question is for the investment community and the rating
rating agencies. Is there a commitment from our side on our fiscal stance? The answer is yes. Is there a growth story? The answer is yes. The investment on infrastructure is part of constructing a growth model.
The finance minister did ask that we leave the Reserve Bank alone and stop peppering them with the questions of nationalization, etc., and questioning their mandate. Will indeed the ANC be agreeing to that?
That is generally the position of the ANC. The ANC has never questioned its independence of the Reserve Bank. Even from conference, when we moved out of conference, we said the independence of the Reserve Bank is sacrosanct. What we're talking about is a different picture completely, the shareholder part of the Reserve Bank.
Mr. Godongwana, I appreciate your time there. ANC Economic Transformation and Policy Head, Mr. Enoch Godongwana. Bulelani, it's over to you.
All right, thank you so much, Arabile. Now joining me for more reaction is the leader of the IFP, Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi. In the medium term, do you think we're going the right direction?
Well, I think that the minister had an unenviable task, because the fact of the matter is that the country is in dire straits. That, therefore, only a magician could have done better than he has done. I've appreciated the fact that he points out, first of all, that the state-owned enterprises are going to be reconsidered. But then at the same time, we learned that South African Airways is going to get 5 billion. So that's a contradiction. Then also, as far as VAT is concerned, which concerns all South Africans, the cost of food. He says that, I mean, the cake flour and the bread flour are going to be zero rated. But then, of course, he then laments the fact that thereby we lose more than 1 billion. There are some very good things, of course, that he said, because I think that we as South Africans must realize that the challenge is not just the challenge to government, it's a challenge to all of us as South Africans. Now, when he says, for instance, that agriculture is going to be the driving force for economic recovery, it sounds very good to me. But at the same time, I say that as far as our people in the rural areas and everywhere have not revived the subsistence economy that we used to have before, I don't think that as far as food security is concerned that we can say that we're anywhere near, getting over our problems. So also, some of the things that the minister said were also good, such as dealing, for instance, with some of the thieves and other people, like people that have looted the bank and others that they are going to be dealt with. I really hope that is going to be done. So that there were some good messages about what we should be doing. But nevertheless, to have expected more than this would have been too optimistic for me. I didn't expect that he would do any better like this, because even money where it is spent, it's like pouring it into a bottomless bucket.
All right, thank you so much, Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, the leader of the IFP, just basically describing it as an unenviable task that the finance minister had. We'll cross now to Abra on the other side.
Bulelani, thank you very much. With me I have Mr. Musiela Kota, of course, the leader of the Congress of the People. Sir, thank you for speaking to us today. Do you have anything positive to say about today's mini-budget speech?
Yeah, well, look, the positive thing is that the minister was very accurate in identifying the problems. And of course, he exposed the fact that the country is in deep debt, that we don't have money, that we can't go on borrowing and borrowing forever, because the mountain of debt is already too high. So, but what could he do? So he still had to go and borrow money again.
If I could just stop you there, I see this gentleman has a poster here speaking specifically about education, and the minister did make a special mention of that again. Do you think we're going to be seeing any changes in that area, because that is one of the key focus areas?
No, you won't see any change in that area now. This is now October. It's the end of the year, and the beginning of the year will be a holiday, and then beginning of the year. The problem is not medium term. The problem is the problem of governance. Since the ANC became government, especially since Zuma took over from Thabo Mbeki, movement in any positive direction really ceased, because the debt, which at that time was about 28 billion rand, almost we were finished with it, is now climbed to 3 trillion. That is where the problem lies. The people of South Africa must simply clean parliament and clean government. They must vote the ANC out of national, provincial, local government structures and put in new men and women. This country has got 57 million people. Put in men and women who are clean, who are not going to perpetuate corruption, theft of money. All this money that we have lost has not been lost in war. It's been lost in the hands of the men and women who are in government today. Put different men and women who will understand
I'm so sorry, I have to stop you right there. That's Mr. Lekota of COPE, obviously expressing his concerns and unhappiness to us right now. I think I'm now crossing over back to my colleague Arabile.
Yeah, certainly, Abra. Thank you so much again for that. Of course, unpacking the reaction of business, and we're joined by none other than Sandile Zungu from the Black Business Council, and even Christy Viljoen from PwC as an economist there as well. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. Sandile, let's unpack from you. Were you happy with the sentiment brought forward by Tito Mboweni?
Well, I think the presentation firstly was very eloquently done. I think the minister brought his style, and there was an element of sensitivity to the needs of the people. I mean, indicating that you are zero rating sanitary pads, flour, that says you are sensitive to the needs of the people. What will have disappointed us in business, especially black business, is the downward revision of growth forecast for the economy. Fundamentally, you have got to grow the economy. Yeah. That's where the focus must be. More than 2% in the short term, medium term, well in excess of 4% to really deal with the social challenges. Yeah. I think the focus on local government, that there's going to be a greater focus on assisting local government in terms of capacity and wastage and malfeasance, is sending the right kind of message. And greater detail on reprioritization of expenditure towards those areas which will stimulate the economy. Obviously not sufficient details there, but there's an indication. Infrastructure, small business, township economies, agriculture, that's wonderful. It's to be welcomed.
Yeah. Christy, your thoughts? I mean, does it stave away the ratings agencies? Does it keep them at bay a little bit, despite the worsening growth forecast, debt going even higher as well? Does it send a clear message to them that we are maintaining fiscal consolidation?
I think they're going to be concerned. You're correct. Growth was revised lower. Government debt is continuing to climb. The deficit isn't shrinking. So the rating agencies will definitely be concerned. We've heard some positive comments from them over the past few months. When they look at these numbers, I'm not so sure. We're going to have some tough talk with them. The next round of reviews will be in November. It sets out a good plan of where we want to be, but in South Africa we're good at making plans, but implementing, that's always the challenge. So I think the speech was good. I like what I'm hearing from Minister Mboweni, but he's not the one making all the decisions on what's happening, and we need an effort from everywhere in government, private sector and labour to get these things fixed.
Yeah, we'll certainly take a look at that and hopefully unpack it a whole lot more, and the sentiment should clearly be clear at a future stage. Bulelani.
Well, thanks again, Arabile. Of course, the finance minister has got everybody talking around that quote by Charles Dickens, A Tale of Two Cities. Now joining me is the PAC MP, Mr. Luthando Mbinda. What kind of age are you seeing out of this mini budget?
Yeah, the way we see, this is the same rhetoric that we have been listening to for the past or the previous finance ministers. There is nothing new, but we do not doubt the ability of Tito Mboweni, and we wish him all the best, and we understand that this is just a medium-term budget statement, but at the same time the issue with us is not about the individual, the issue is about the policy directives of the Relungbat, which have failed the indigenous, the poor of the poorest dismally. So that's where our problem is. I do not have even to tell you about the high rate of unemployment, about the poverty levels, about people going to bed without food. But what we are interested in as the PAC, and what I think we must appreciate, as little as it is, the 16.5 billion injection, more especially to agriculture, because our belief is that our people should not be beggars. They should be independent, they should be self-reliant and self-sufficient. That is why we always see the land issue, the restoration of land, as the primary focus. So immediately you talk agriculture, you talk land. Of course, land is not only agriculture, we mean everything, including the resources, as you know. But the speech, the policy directives of the ruling party, I must say, they have failed our people, and they will continue to fail as long as our people continue voting for the same ruling party, which is very corrupt. You look at the level of corruption. And then again, I appreciate, more especially when you look at, you'll listen to him saying Treasury now will work very close with Auditor General, but I am hoping that they will also encourage Auditor General to expedite the issue of performance auditing, because our problem...
Let's leave it there, Mr. Mbinda. We're out of time. I'm sorry for that. No problem. Mr. Luthando Mbinda, PAC MP, I believe now we're crossing back to you, Arabile.
Yeah, thank you so much, Bulelani. Well, Colin Coleman from Goldman Sachs joins me now as we unpack his thoughts. Colin, the reprioritization of funds, perhaps not made as explicitly clear, but it does sort of help to give a clear path that we are indeed spending this money over the medium-term framework, and we will focus on these particular areas. You happy?
Well, I think what they're trying to do is improve the quality of the funds expenditure that they have, and you saw that also with the creation of this project management office around infrastructure. So cutting out corruption in the actual procurement of projects is very important, and clearly that's on the agenda, and I think the Finance Minister seems very clear on that. Obviously the fiscal ratios broadly were slightly weaker than the market anticipated, so you've seen the rand weaken by about 1% in response to that, and that's the global markets looking at the debt levels, looking at the expenditure to revenue ratios. The revenue ratios, the revenue itself is less than anticipated, expenditure the same, so the overall ratios are looking weaker, and that's obviously going to play on people's minds. I don't think that will be sufficient to change the rating agencies' views on South Africa, and obviously this was a masterful performance by the Finance Minister, effectively dealing with the facts at hand.
Yeah. Very quickly as well, 0.7% growth for the year. Ambitious? Possible?
No, I think that's, it's clearly a very disappointing outcome. We have 2% population growth. To have 0.7% economic growth is our biggest problem. It means people are getting poorer. So we need growth rates in excess of population growth, and we need to get there fast. Goldman Sachs growth rate projection for 2019 is 2.4% relative to, I think, the 1.7% that they're projecting for 2019. So we're more bullish than them. But again, I'd say that is not that ambitious relative to population growth. We need to do better with growth. That is our overall biggest problem in the country.
Colin Coleman, appreciate your time. Colin Coleman there from Goldman Sachs. Abra, back to you.
Arabile, thank you so much. With me right now I have a gentleman. He's not a politician, he's not a member of parliament, he's not an economist. He's actually just a concerned citizen who took a train all the way from Wellington to Cape Town to Parliament today to come and represent, or to come and make his voice heard. And of course this is a parliament of the people, so he's just here, because he wants his voice to be heard. But I want to let him speak for himself. Sir, who are you? Why are you here today? And obviously you were concerned about education. What exactly drove you to come here today?
You were correct when you said that I'm a concerned parent. My name is Christo Pienaar. I'm from Wellington, and there in Wellington where we stay, Ons kinders word gangsters op een simpele rede. Ons kinders het niks om te doen in middags as hulle die skool uitkom. Al die hoë skole in Wellington, Weltevier sekondêr en van Wykplek sekondêr. En ons ouer en onderwysersvergaderinge sê die onderwysers vir ons dat daar's net een set handboeke vir al die grade op die hoë skole. Nou die kinders kan nie gaan huiswerk doen as hulle van die skool afkom nie. En dis hoekom kan hulle nie gaan leer en hulle werk hier sien nie. En dis hoekom as hulle punte baie laag gesit in eksamens kom. En dit maak dat ons kinders dryf. En
ek wil net gou vra, die minister het gepraat van hy gaan 'n klein boost gee aan education. Does this at least make you feel a bit better?
'n klein boost van na education se kant toe. Dat het ons beter voel. Ek dink dat education moet geprioritiseer word. Want is baie belangrik. Ons weet ons kom nou al lank al en ons kinders, they drop out of school because they don't get work because of the quality of the education they have. So they become gangsters. So if there's a boost, the boost must be really a big boost. Yes.
Christa, dankie vir jou tyd.
Baie dankie.
I think I'm crossing back to my colleague Arabile right now, if that's correct.
Well, yeah, thank you so much, Abraham. Joined by Afzal Khan there from Raft Consulting. Afzal, let's talk about this now. We spoke a little bit earlier, and the rand has now today lost 1.1%. But is it really because of the speech? Do you think that the speech was perhaps negative in a sense?
So there's nothing really in the speech that can have such a quick impact. So it's probably other external factors. The negatives, I think, that came out of the speech is 27.4 billion shortfall expected to February on revenue, but coupled with the fact that there's an extra 30 billion of wage spend that was unbudgeted, that is unbudgeted. It means your deficit is actually 57 billion. You know, so when you look at it like that, that could be a negative. We'll see how the ratings agencies, because that's kind of your analysts that are watching this. I don't think the currency speculators play such an immediate role in it. So yeah, we'll see what the analysts say.
Sentiment out of it though, he used words like "I will," "we will make sure," and you know, he made sure that it came off as if it's authoritative and this will finally get done. Are you convinced?
So he told stories also. Yeah. So I like the fact that he was using "I," because it does look like some of this was written by him because of the focus on the Reserve Bank. So if this is his speech and he's saying "I," it means he intends to stay, which I think is really positive for everyone. I think he'd make a brilliant finance minister. The guy we had before I also thought was really good. It's unfortunate, but I think if he can stay, I think he'll be good and just implement this 5-point plan. It's a good 5-point plan, but it's a kind of plan everybody could come up with. The proof is in the pudding.
Indeed it is. Afzal Khan there from Raft Consulting. Bulelani, over to you.
Thank you so much, Arabile. Still taking some reactions, and now we're going to focus on labor. Joining me is the General Secretary of COSATU, Mr. Bheki Ntshalintshalile. Obviously, a lot of focus around the issue of the government wage bill. Your thoughts on that?
I think the minister wasted a lot of time talking about those issues. To us, that is a non-issue. So we got an agreement negotiated over a long time in relations to the wage negotiations and the working conditions of the public sectors. I think he's attacking the wrong people. He should be focusing more to the people that have huge packs, including himself. He should have started at the top with the ministers, with the members of parliament, and address, because that's where the money goes, not to the poor people who cannot afford to have houses, etc., who are doing double jobs. You can see it in terms of the overtime that they are working. It's because there are shortages. They are doubling it up, and there's evidence given by other ministers that in the public sectors, in the health system, for an example, there's a shortage of health workers. If you go to the safety and security, the police, you go to the doctors, you go to the ratio in terms of teacher education. So in order to address those people, indirectly the wage bill will increase in relation to those issues, but it does not mean people are earning higher. If you have to cut it at the top where it belongs, be able to recover money and put it back to the fiscus, and if you do that, it will change, it will tilt, and balances will indicate that there's no huge wage bill that he's talking about.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Bekinjali, the General Secretary of COSATU, giving us his thoughts around the issues of the government wage bill. We're now close to you, Abra.
Bulelani, thank you very much. I'm speaking to a gentleman now. His badge says his name is Siya Bulela Fobosi and he's from Rhodes University. You spoke to me about early childhood development. That's your field of interest. So in relation to what the minister says, what do you have to say about what he said regarding education?
Well, regarding education, really, what shocked me is the fact that the minister mentioned that there's going to be reprioritization of funding from other programs that are underspending to other programs, that deserve, that money, So, and I thought of early childhood development grant, which was introduced last year, the last financial year, and that grant had underperformance and underspending of about 59 million. In the first financial year. So it is very disappointing for me to see that there was underspending in the grant. For example, your Eastern Cape had underspending of about 48%. So that concerns me. So I was wondering whether that grant is going to be affected, and what does it mean for the learners who are coming from Eastern Cape, from the ECD centers that are still need to benefit from that grant, that even don't benefit, in order to improve early childhood development foundation phase of basic education. Because I think, in order for learners to progress well in their education, they need to have a very good foundation. So early childhood development is very important.
Thank you so much. I do think that is a very valid concern and question that you are posing. Lots of people expressing concern about education and the state of education and what exactly is happening in that sector financially. Adabile, be crossing back to you now.
Yeah, thank you so much, Abra. Well, Tabi Leok, our economist, joining me now. Tabi, zero rated. We saw those 3 items come in. That must certainly bring a smile to your face.
Definitely. I mean, this was a labor of love, but a lot of work that went into the zero rating process. 2 months with a great team of people, and I am elated that the 3 that we recommended have been considered for zero rating.
Growth projections, though, not looking too good.
Not looking too good, but that was expected given that the Treasury had expected 1.5% in February, and we knew that we will have to have a projection that is below 1%.
But is 0.7 still ambitious, or is that perhaps attainable?
So I think that we could see a rebound in the second half of the year. We're already seeing a lot better high-frequency numbers, especially manufacturing. So we could actually see around 0.7, but 0.7 is still a very low number in terms of growth. Growth will be a problem, especially when we look at what we require in terms of revenues. Revenues, an increase of revenues is supported by an increase in growth.
And expenditure looks like, obviously, again, the main issue here. But if you take a look at our debt situation, that goes all the way back up to 4%, having expected it to go to 3.6% of GDP.
Yeah, that was also disappointing because I expected the debt profile to improve slightly, and it has deteriorated. We also saw deterioration in the debt to GDP figures, and that means that these are alarm bells for rating agencies. I don't expect them to downgrade us, but I think that this is something that they will look at with very close eyes and look at especially budget and see what comes out of there, because hopefully there'll be slight improvements, but again we need growth. I also feel that there's a lot of reprioritization going into investments and infrastructure investment, and even though infrastructure is great because it creates sustainable long-term growth, my problem is, and I question I think we're overly focusing on infrastructure without considering jobs. So who's going to do the infrastructure projects, and for who? Is it a case of if they build it, they will come. And so you're building road infrastructure, you're building railway. Who's going to use that railway? If you're building bridges, who's going to build those bridges? Who's going to utilize those bridges if people can't afford, either businesses can't afford to travel over them, consumers can't afford to drive over them, fuel prices have increased. So I just don't know what the correlation, whether there's a strong correlation between jobs and also infrastructure, and that needs to be looked into.
Lots of questions being answered there by Tabilioka, economist, who joins us to unpack that budget. Bulelani, I'll cross over to you for more political rhetoric as well.
Well, thanks again, Arabile. Of course, the center focus of this mini budget is around growth and job creation. And now we're going to be joined by Minister for Small Business Development, Minister Lindiwe Zulu. Thank you so much for joining us. Firstly, over 20 billion rand that was meant for SMMEs, but municipalities are essentially failing to pay SMMEs on time. Your department, what are you doing? What measures are you putting in place to ensure that SMMEs, the drivers of the economy, are paid on time?
Well, what is important to note is what the Minister of Finance himself said about strengthening the governance structures at a municipal level, but also making sure that we employ the right people for the right job. And my experience in the 5 years that I have been in office, I do also realize that there is a weakness in the system, because for small and medium enterprises to be assisted, we've got to make sure that they don't always rely on what national government is presenting to them. Provincial structures, local structures should be the first point of call for our SMMEs. And so I'm very happy with the minister even going to an extent of saying there is a set aside amount of money which we are supposed to use to ensure that we capacitate those that are at the level of local government, because those are the people who are supposed to assist your small and medium enterprises. Putting that aside, I think the budget, it's a midterm, by the way. I think we need to keep that in mind, because this is not necessarily the budget. This is just a framework of what we're going to do in the interventionist period of time before next year's budget. What I think is important for SMMEs to watch out for is the amount of money which has been said is going to be spent on infrastructure development. What has that got? How much of that is going to be spent on SMMEs? Do SMMEs even know where to access those opportunities? The minister also spoke about township and rural development. Those are the opportunities for SMMEs, and my message to SMMEs is that get to the nearest departments that deal with those issues. Transport, building of roads and all that in the township. Where are the opportunities for SMMEs? Our responsibility, obviously, is to then push those departments which have been named here as with opportunities to say, tell us what's in there for small and medium enterprises. Let us also direct the SMMEs to that road.
Another big concern, Minister, is always the issue around the cost and the complexity of starting businesses in South Africa, which is something that really some international investors have been complaining about. Locally and internationally, what is the department doing to ensure that you simplify that process so that it can become easier to do business in South Africa?
We work together with the Department of Trade and Industry, because we must not also be seen in isolation. We are one government, and one government needs to be coordinated in order for us to be able to do that. The good thing is that we just go into the investment summit. Some of the issues that we are dealing with, we will be breaking down to the investors, giving them assurance, giving them direction as to where we think they can put their money in terms of investment. Yes, of course, our task is to make it easy for investors. But investors, on the other hand, they also need to have an understanding that we've got a problem in South Africa, that is the transformation of our economy, that is introducing people who were never in the space of business. Hence, we also want to say to the investors, while we have our BEE codes, while we have our supplier development codes, while we have all those codes, we want to engage with with them in such a way that they appreciate why we have those codes, and we must help them to comply with those codes. And it is possible for them to comply through the Department of Trade and Industry, through the Department of Economic Development, through our own department, but through all other government departments. The key for us here, let's go to that investment forum, and I'm happy as the Department of Small Business Development that we also have been working together with all departments and the planning towards that. So we have a role as the Department of Small Business Development to go and sell the idea of an importance of investing in small and medium enterprises who have an opportunity for investment return, because we do appreciate investors won't want to invest in something where they won't get returns. Investment is possible in South Africa, and SMMEs must not be ignored in that space.
Talking about the ignorance around SMMEs, the president is always making their focus that growth is going to be driven by both international investors as well as local investors. Now, with regards to this investment summit that kicks off tomorrow, what is the space for small businesses locally?
Well, we have to start with the local or local investors, because international investors will not have the confidence if they realize that your own investors who have a possibility of investing are not investing. And I think the preparation for this summit has pulled our local investors, has pulled government. So business, government, civil society and all have been pulled into one place where they are told we need to work together in order for international investors to have the confidence. We just came out of the job summit, and so from the job summit we could see the commitments that were made by our own local investors. And I know that the coming investment, you will hear of quite big investments. Some of the people that are going to be making those announcements, fortunately for us, are the ones who we have been working with as a Department of Small Business Development. They've put some money in terms of supplier development, in terms of ensuring that they train our own people. I'm not going to name them here. You will hear when they are being named, and you can trace back and see how much we have worked with them. They made the announcement, some of them at the job summit. They're going to be making even greater announcements at the investment summit. So I do believe, and as the president believes, and as the government believes, and I'm sure as the Minister of Finance believes, the importance of addressing transformation in South Africa will depend on how much we empower your small and medium enterprises. Addressing the issues of unemployment and inequality will also very much rest on how much support we give to small and medium enterprises. I don't see any other future, because if developed countries can tell you about the importance of small and medium enterprises, and we as South Africa fail to see that, then it means there's something that's not right. But I have confidence, because I've had support at government level where all ministers are looking forward to exposing to SMMEs what is possible and what is available within government departments. But lastly, I think there's got to be an understanding that while government is opening up the opportunities, private sector also needs to open up opportunities within their value chain, because they are very well connected. They've got deeper pockets, and SMMEs don't have that. So if we can all just have an understanding that in order to create the jobs that we want, we have to work together as South Africa. I liked the budget speech of the midterm budget of the minister, because I think that it did address some of the challenges that we face as a Department of Small Business Development.
All right, thank you so much, Minister Lindiwe Zulu, Minister for Small Business Development, giving us some thoughts and food for thought around the medium-term budget policy statement. Of course, now the focus is going to be looking forward to the investment summit that kicks off tomorrow in Johannesburg. On that note, we say goodbye from Parliament, and it's back to you in Johannesburg.
All right, many thanks there to our colleagues, Bulelani Philip, Arabile Gumete and Abra Baby, of course. They were keeping us abreast with the happenings. This, of course, post the midterm budget presented by the newly appointed Finance Minister, Tito Mboweni. So the Minister is also expected to have a media briefing. As soon as that happens, we'll take you back to Cape Town. All right, a very good afternoon to you. Thank you so much indeed for joining us here on SA Today. My name is Balisa Chubisi. Let us now take a look at some top stories this hour. Hip-hop artist Double HP has passed away. The 38-year-old, whose real name is Jabulani Tsambo, died at midday today. The news was confirmed by Double HP's friend and producer Thabiso Thodetsi. Details surrounding the hip-hop veteran's death are still sketchy at this moment. Thodetsi said he's sure that the family will issue a statement moving forward. Finance Minister Tito Mboweni says this year's public sector wage agreement exceeds the 212 billion rand budgeted for salary increases and other conditions of services over the next 3 years. Minister Mboweni was delivering his first medium-term budget policy statement in Parliament this afternoon. The minister says departments must carefully manage overtime and performance incentives. He says revenue shortfalls would have been larger were it not for the increase in personal income as well as other taxes. Minister Mboweni says the issue of reducing government headcounts must be approached with sensitivity. The minister has also touched on state-owned enterprises.
Reconfiguring our state-owned companies requires us to take a hard look at how they operate. Let me repeat this. Reconfiguring our state-owned companies requires us to take a hard look at how they operate. Our current challenges with state-owned companies present us with an opportunity to demolish the walls that exist between the private and public sectors. To demolish the walls that exist between the private and public sectors. Along with other key economic institutions, we will urgently fix the South African Revenue Service. It is a matter of public record that the capacity of SARS has been weakened. It is in this context that the SARS leadership must and has to be strengthened. We cannot expect to continue functioning effectively if the tax collection authority is broken.
Meanwhile, referring to how the government plans to implement the growth-enhancing reforms, Minister Mboweni said government is withdrawing the Mineral and Petroleum Resources Development Amendment Bill. He also announced that visa requirements will be relaxed to boost tourism. Minister Mboweni also said steps will also be taken to reduce data cost.
Investors are in it for the long run. They want to know that our policies are clear and consistent. We must stop, Mr. President, talking in contradictory terms. The President has already taken the lead in rebuilding confidence by appointing a team of investment envoys. We look forward to the upcoming investment conference. Already in the mining sector, we have finalized the mining charter and we are withdrawing the Mineral and Petroleum Resources Development Amendment Bill. Where is the Minister of... Oh, thank you, Minister, thank you. Thank you for that. Visa requirements will be eased to boost tourism. We will make it easier for people with skills to work in South Africa. 10-year multiple entry visas will be extended to several countries. In communications, thank you for that. In communications, the proposed policy for the licensing of high-demand spectrum has been gazetted. Frequencies to enable high-speed internet will be auctioned early next year. Steps will be taken to reduce data costs and improve data quality.
COSATU has also reacted to the minister's mid-term budget speech. Our reporter Bulelani Philip caught up with the Federation's General Secretary, Becky Njalinjali.
I think the minister wasted a lot of time talking about those issues. To us, that is a non-issue. So we got an agreement negotiated over a long time in relations to the wage negotiations and the working conditions of the public sectors. I think he's attacking the wrong people. He should be focusing more to the people that have huge packs, including himself. He should have started at the top with the ministers, with the members of parliament, and address, because that's where the money goes, not to the poor people who cannot afford to have houses, etc., who are doing double jobs. You can see it in terms of the overtime that they are working. It's because there are shortages. They are doubling it up, and there's evidence given by other ministers that in the public sectors, in the health system, for an example, there's a shortage of health workers. If you go to the safety and security, the police, you go to the doctors, you go to the ratio in terms of teacher education. So in order to address those people, indirectly the wage bill will increase in relation to those issues, but it does not mean people are earning higher. If you have to cut it at the top where it belongs, be able to recover money and put it back to the fiscus, and if you do that, it will change, it will tilt, and balances will indicate that there's no huge wage bill that he's talking about.
The Eastern Cape government says that a joint effort by political leaders in the province is one